Hey, left my tea behind. All right, and as always, we're gonna do that. So the game is Stonewall, Battle of Kernstown. This is I think 1977 is what I looked up. It's by Mark Herman. Not his first SPI war game, and I'm assuming that's where he got his start. Writing war games. I seem to remember him as being kind of one of that young SPI S&T crowd that they've got a bunch of teenagers to write games, really. In this case, he's writing a modification to Richard Berg's Terrible Swift Sword. One that's able to fit into the magazine format for the S&Ts, and you've got pretty much standard magazine quality of that time. Well, not in my copy. My copy was already, a well-played version when I picked it up I don't know, it had to be pretty close to 77 actually. Then when I've had it for so long, and this one's just fallen apart completely without the binding or anything the magazine could give it for strength. I do the same. I pull them out of my magazines because I wanted the rules where I can get the rules, and I want my magazine where I can go read it and enjoy it. Lots and lots of nice charts and tables on the map board itself. I find that really kind of helpful. That wasn't always the case in the S&T games a lot of times, or in SPI games in general. A lot of times they filled the map with map and had to use some of the rules for charts and tables. In this case, actually, this is a fairly heavy game for that era. This is really the beginning of the heavier games, I think. So it weighs in at 16 pages of rules, which is a fairly stiff amount. Remember, this is Terrible Swift Sword, a monster game, boiled down. Yes, some of it was taken out to make it fit in the rules or whatever, but some of it also was kind of streamlined a little bit, I guess. Now, the modifications from the TSS system, I think, don't terribly help the game. The combat being not bloody enough, we've talked about that. Some of the other things that are missing from the player aids are a shame. For example, the fact that just like in Terrible Swift Sword, there isn't any place where you can find the movement rates except by looking in the rulebook. It's in a couple of places in the rulebook, but it would be really helpful to have this on the map. There certainly was space for it up here in the terrain effects and unit formation charts and stuff like that to give you little reminders of that. I think there may have been a few other things that were kind of left out of here that could have been helpful. Sequence of play could have probably fit somewhere. It's hard to tell. Some things you almost never use, like the demoralization table. And there's kind of a question there. The use of tracks for the artillery crew. I've never been happy with the modified versions of using the artillery. I think they give too much prominence to the crew and make the crew too vulnerable. And that's always been a gripe for me about this one. And really everything that followed TSS in the series, the Great Battles of the American Civil War, really made artillery more vulnerable than I feel it should be, since it can only fire if it's the top unit in the stack. Now when you look at the Gamers series, the artillery really provides a powerful punch there, because you can hide it under other units so it doesn't take losses, except from counter-battery fire, and when you do shoot at it, even with infantry, you're taking guns out. You're taking a proportion of its firepower out, not oh, I killed 100 men, and that's really what the gun crew's size was. So, well, everybody's dead. In this, it's 100-man kills off half the gun crew, and I think that feels a little too extreme. And I felt always the same way when I played your Wilson's Creek or Pea Ridge. Although I'm still collecting those suckers up because they are very interesting, and it may be a possibility that I may want to tweak them as I'm playing or something. I don't know. There's an intention there. I just don't think it works correctly. And I think when we look at the Civil War Brigade series again, we'll see it's a lot more pleasing to see the artillery providing the kind of defensive backbone that they really did provide. And you kind of see that in Terrible Swift Sword, but it goes away here. Here the guns are just too easy to silence, it feels like. I don't know. This is obviously a much, much older and simpler system than the CWB system, but it's the link is very clear between the two. You know, you play this, and to me, when I opened up Thunder at the Crossroads after, playing these games for a while, and the GBA ACW ones, for me it was a moment of revelation. It was, my God. I loved when I picked this up. And I loved when I finally got Terrible Swift Sword and got to play it a couple of times. But with the Gamers ones, it was the next step of, all right, I just don't know if these qualify anymore. The only reason for these is sort of to explore battles that didn't get covered by the Gamers. Now, the scale is different. For example, with this, the brigade level, the regimental level that it's covered in is definitely more applicable. And you kind of feel the same way probably about a lot of the Brigade Series games. You can't do the light battles with the Brigade Series. And the regimental sub-series, I'm assuming, can handle a lot more of the battles. I don't want to do the monsters necessarily in that, though. Thunder at the Crossroads feels like it's exactly the right level. TSS, yeah, it's interesting. And it's fun to play that big a thing. But, it's also exhausting to play something that large. Whereas Thunder is much more manageable on a 2-map rather than 3, really. But with more space around to maneuver, etc. I don't know, though. There is something glorious about playing it with all those units out there. Anyway, this is, I think, one of the weaker entries in the line because of some of the reasons I pointed out. Also, sort of the special conditions of it make it not really a stand-up, slug-out fight. Now, that may be what drew the interest to it and said, hey, here's something we can do that's not just... Because Civil War battles do tend to be pretty simplistic. Largely, there's not a lot of intricate counterplay between the different branches in order to get the results you want. You don't have to be skilled tactically in the use of the units to kind of get the units easily. It's fairly easy in this, once you know what you want to do, to effect it. Hey, yeah, I'm gonna send this force out and I'll flank them. And that's true with most Civil War tactical games. There's very seldomly this complicated interplay that there is in like the Napoleonic or the Age of Reason stuff. Which means that the games themselves can kind of abstract a lot of this stuff away that was hardly ever effective. Things like cavalry charges, etc. Defense wins the day on these because the rifle has such good range and the artillery can be kept at bay. So the artillery is your most potent thing, but it can be kept from attacking the way it was used in the Napoleonic era by the extra range that the rifled muskets have. And that means that if you take good positioning, you're going to be really hard to knock out of places. That makes, in particular, the Gettysburg scenario, an interesting one for me for Civil War. This one, why is it not so interesting? Well, because, okay, so the Confederates want to cut through and cut across the map. That's basically what they want to do in this scenario. But they can't quite just do that. That's not enough to win them the game. They need to do something a little more. And it's a little hard to figure out what that little more is. You know, it kills some stuff, but it doesn't have sort of this straightforward goal that's easy for me to discern and pursue. In something like the Gettysburg scenario, I can say, yeah, I want to take them hills right around Gettysburg because they're important. And they're important in every game. You know, the Cemetery Ridge and Culp's Hill, they're just absolutely vital. Less so with Little Round Top, right? You can kind of usually pass that off in any game I've seen, if you need to. Okay, so there's one focal point where one person can defend and the other person's trying to figure out how to bring his forces to bear most effectively. This isn't that kind of battle. This is something where maybe you need more thought, and I don't like thinking. So, I mean, seriously, I really do not want to try to puzzle out how to cause a victory in this game. That may be more interesting to other people, but from my point of view, it's a little less so. However, the game still holds its place in my heart. It was one of my very first real war games, and it made me say, I want Terrible Swift Sword. I want it, damn it. And I wanted it for quite a long time after I got this, really, until, I don't know, I think my third year of college. I finally managed to say, you know, I can go without eating for a little while. I can put down the $50 for TSS. And, you know, I've been really happy with the plays that I got out of that. This was such a deal, though. And, you know, it's funny because this period, and until the end of the SPI period for S&Ts, was really something very magical in terms of what you were getting for the cost you were paying. These magazines ran around $2 each. And I'm looking at Cedar Mountain, which I just recently paid, I don't know, probably not a hell of a lot, but maybe $10 for, plus shipping. And it was kind of the one missing one in my subscription ran out right before Cedar Mountain, and then I didn't get it in time to get it or something. I don't know. I got confused. Anyway, I finally picked that one up, and there's something wonderful in that one, which is always been alluded to, and I never read it. It's the economic statement of why SPI was dead. You know, I mean, this is the, oh yeah, we're going to change what we're doing because, you know, we've been losing money the last couple of years. What? You've been doing what? Yeah, we've been selling games that are, you know, at $6 a piece, and they've been selling really, really well, and we've been doing great quantity, but we were losing money on each one. Okay, that's crazy. And S&T could not have been much better. Subscription issues cost, I don't remember what it was. It was around $15 or something for a subscription. 15, maybe 18, I don't know. For 6 issues, okay? No, it had to be under 18 because it was well under it was around $2.50, I think. If you bought them on their own, they were like $5 or $6, just buying the magazine at a store. But if you bought them by subscription, they were around $2.50 a piece. How could you go wrong? I mean, you got a game, you got a historical magazine that's actually not too thick, but fairly special purpose. For something so special purpose and small a run, I would assume, there's a lot of information in there and a lot of interest. And I used to love reading the FYIs and this, that, and the other. And I've been looking at the more recent ones that I've picked up in the past year, and I'm so unimpressed comparatively. You know, I don't know why. Maybe just because the magic's still there for these old ones for me, but it just seems like the whole flavor is very different. And there's a big difference between, so the $250 that I was paying for this, that was less than an Omni magazine would cost, right? Or a Penthouse or anything else. Those guys ran about $3 a pop. And yeah, they were much fuller and glossy magazines and had some great stuff in them too, and were fantastic. And magazines must be a fortune now. That's all I can guess. I don't know. I wouldn't look. But the gaming magazines now run about the price you'd expect a game to run of that quality. You know, they're running about $20 each. These guys, the folio games used to run minimal around $6. The smallest thing you could get was around $6. This was cheaper. And some of these were fantastic, bigger things. Like Sicily was had an extra-sized counter sheet. This one has more rules. You almost never got sort of the minimum that you would get from a folio game sometimes. So these were just such a wonderful deal. And it's such a shame that if SPI was making money and surviving with these, and with their bigger games, that they allowed really horrible business planning to destroy themselves. I mean, it just sucks, and we've not seen anything like it since. We saw the expatriates, the Mark Hermans and Balkowski and the like, who fled the TSR image and went and, you know, made some fantastic stuff over in Victory Games, but it never had the same kind of publication rate. It never had the same kind of business model. It almost feels like SPI was designed so exclusively for the person playing the games as opposed to anything else. And maybe for that, you know, high school or college age student who just couldn't afford much in a way that no one else really has managed. They weren't aiming at the cheap components either. When you saw what had to be bigger print runs by things like Steve Jackson Games, trying to keep their component size or quality low enough that they could charge low prices, because they also were in that really micro game organizational idea. Well, you don't have to cut your own counters in this. Of course, I clipped mine, but they came as die-cut counters. The map, it's kind of sturdy. This isn't an ogre map, you know? And you got it for what? Half the price? Hey, come on. And there's historical research based on it. This isn't just somebody saying, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there were giant tanks that could shoot each other? I mean, there's very little to something like Ogre compared to, what came out every 2 months in an S&T magazine. And all of it at the same time. You had all this other, broad array of games that were being put out at the same time. Just, we've not seen anything like it. GMT is probably the closest in terms of how much it produces. And they put out a game every couple months or something. I don't know. It feels totally different to me. And this is really something from that golden age. And even though there's some wonderful things about gaming right now, and I'm glad I have the money to enjoy gaming right now, I didn't have that money at this time. And all I could afford was stuff that there's nothing like it now. There's no entry level now for, and maybe there's no market for it, but there's no entry level for the kid to come in and maybe plop down $10-15 for something reasonably meaty. Not something trivial. When you look at something like Victory Point games, they run like $30 each and are fairly light games when it comes down to it. And their components look like they should be under $10. They claim they're not making any money off them, basically, of any significance, that they're barely breaking even or whatever, but I just can't be impressed with that. I don't know what their print runs are like or whatever, but honestly, it's really a shame, and I don't know what the move is. I guess the only thing is the print and play, but for someone to take that effort and say, yeah, I gotta print and play this, they've gotta want it already. It's easier to get somebody hooked into the hobby with that cheap initial one. I don't know if anybody's giving out free games the way they used to. You know, I mean, I went, when I bought these, the guy I bought them from, I bought 6 games, I think, for $2. The guy I bought them from said, "Oh yeah, here," and handed me Napoleon at Waterloo. He had a stack this big of them because he was a club runner. You know, he ran a wargaming club, well, a gaming club in general, and he just had this pile of Napoleon at Waterloos that he would hand out to anybody who seemed vaguely interested. Here you go. Here's a game. And it's a good game, you know? It's a really decent game, especially at the entry level. I don't see that. I don't see where we're reaching out to people. I go to a local comic book and magic store. Nobody's got a stack of war games there. There aren't any war games there to begin with, but nobody's got a stack of free ones to give out the way they once did. And we're just missing that, you know? And the hobby's never going to be like it once was without that kind of engine running in it. And Napoleon at Waterloo, that was an early decision by SPI. Put this out, get it to people. Avalon Hill marketing and getting itself in regular stores. Early decision. We don't see that kind of action now. It's still, you know, it's a niche hobby. The closest thing that comes to us is the rest of the stuff over at Board Game Geek. You know, some of the more popular of the Euros and the Ameritrash type stuff, yeah, they're showing up some places. But the gaming industry is just not what it once was. There may be more gamers, I don't know, but it does not feel the way it used to me. All right.